June 6, 1944, 5:34 a.m. The lamps in the OKW operations room threw a yellow, patient light over a table full of maps. The paper smelled of wax and damp ink. Coffee sat cooling in chipped enamel mugs. The telephones, which at any other hour hummed like a hive, were making a different sound now. Thin, urgent clicks and the hollow buzz of unanswered rings. Outside, Berlin was a city waking to an ordinary summer day. Inside, men who had spent their lives studying the calculus of movement and attrition felt the floor drop out beneath them. You step into the room just as Hauptmanns and adjutants are running in from the telephone lines. Their boots make small noises against the worn floorboards. They sound tiny in a room that has carried decisions about millions of lives. In the center, beneath the map's chalk-smudged ridges, sits General Feldmarschall Wilhelm Keitel, little more than a silhouette thrown against the light, and beside him, wiry and flat-faced, is Oberstabschef Alfred Jodl, the man who translates possibility into orders. Their faces are lined, not with age alone, but with the strain of having the whole war threaded through their shoulders. At 5:36, a young captain from the Western Telephone Exchange arrives at the map table, voice clipped, reports from Northwest Sector. Strange airborne landings, gliders, paratroops. Radios picked up transmissions, machine gun and mortar fire inland. He lays a thin slip of paper down. Jodl takes it as a man accepts a wound, quickly, with a controlled expression. Keitel reads, his thumb dragging a dark line of coffee across the margin. The room shifts toward the map like a flock sensing wind. In Caen and around the Cotentin Peninsula, other rooms are arranging the same motion. At 4:30 a.m., in a chateau that will later be described as a headquarters, Field Marshal Erwin Rommel's map stand is empty. He has left France the day before, a small human detail that will come to matter in the cold calculus of command, to visit his wife for her birthday. In the trenches, company commanders will ask later if the Desert Fox, whose name has been carved into German propaganda like a talisman, had been owed the courtesy of staying. It is the kind of question that history will argue over while men bleed. Farther north, in the Norman hedgerows and the long, exposed fields, junior officers feel the ocean as much as hear it, the taste of salt and diesel on the wind, the rhythmic pounding of mortars like a new language. U.S. troops, British Tommies, Canadian soldiers, some have arrived with their boots still wet from the Channel, and they have brought with them the most dangerous thing the Germans had not fully believed, a deliberate, coordinated determination to cross an ocean. The Germans had expected an attack, eventually, but the place and the time were spoken of in hypotheses, in ifs acceptable during staff briefings. The Allies turned an if into a morning. Inside the OB West headquarters at Saint-Germain-en-Laye, Field Marshal Gerd von Rundstedt awakes to the telephone. The first whisper, the first crawling note that something is moving along the coast, arrives like a tremor. Rundstedt's staff, a long-practiced bureaucracy of maps, staff rides and printing doctrine, tries to reconcile the new noise with the old assumptions. The army has always loved decisive reserves, the armored fist. The Panzer divisions held back until the decisive counterpunch. But the Panzer Reserve is a political animal now. Only one mouth at the center can let it loose. Hitler. That name hangs over the morning like a cloud of ash. By doctrine, the commander-in-chief could authorize the movement of strategic reserves. By practice, nothing moved without the Führer's blessing. The chain of command had ossified into ritual. Requests for movement went up through channels and were sent back folded into phrases like awaiting Führer's orders. The men at the front, regimental commanders, divisional chiefs, do not like delays. The men at the center fear the Führer. Both habits will meet this morning and neither will fare well. At the OKW table, Jodl rubs his temple. He knows the telephones add up into a pattern. Glider landings inland, beachheads secured, bridgeheads forming. He also knows, with the professional cruelty of a man trained to see the world in possibilities, that the Allies have been whispering to them for months. Operation Fortitude, the Phantom Armies, the rubber tanks and synthetic broadcast, all crafted to make Berlin look where the Allies want them to look. The staff pores over reports with a new, rising suspicion. Were these landings merely a feint toward Calais? Or is every scrap of paper now the truth? In the field, Major General Heinrich Hein, an armored commander in the reserve, receives a note ordering 2 Panzer divisions to be ready for movement to the Caen sector. He looks at the ink and at the horizon. The roads are mud when the Channel has been angry 2 days before. Allied aircraft already rule the sky in many sectors. Moving heavy armor is not a simple administrative box. It is a decision that places tons of metal and human hope to an exposed column. The order must be specific. Who commands them? Where do they cross? Who will provide air cover? The senior commanders in France send their wires, request immediate release of armor. The wires make the same sound as predictions, taut, uncertain. You can almost feel the fear in these lines. Not of physical pain, not yet, but of the personal consequence. Keitel and Jodl were heirs to a principle that had been slowly poisoned by the Führer's personal grip. Officers would rather wait than displease. They will tell themselves later that they were honoring the chain of command. The truth is cruder. A system had become a trap. The first hours of June the 6th are full of people trying to figure out how to act when action itself must be begged for like a favor. At 7 a.m., the first clear photographic reconnaissance arrives. The photographs are small and grainy, but they show men ashore, vehicles on the sands. The strange geometry of invasion, beach obstacles, clustered landing craft, red smoke. Jodl and Keitel bring the prince to Hitler's staff and find an old, familiar problem. In Berchtesgaden the Führer sleeps late. An order he had given the week before, to be left undisturbed unless invasion, was unmistakable, is now interpreted by his aides as a literal commandment. They have been trained, terrified, schooled to keep the man's sleep inviolate. Why wake the Führer if this might be a feint? Is it better to endure his wrath than to wake a tempest? Timidity and terror are twin saplings grafted into the branches of decision-making. In Normandy, the German coastal batteries fire with the steady, ritual cadence drilled into them for years, but the fire is not enough. On Omaha Beach, young soldiers fall into the surf under crystalline sky. On Utah, a smaller tragedy morphs into a capable foothold. The Allies do not need perfection on every beach. They need presence, and they have brought force and planning in equal measure. Each hour, the Allies stay on the beach. The decision window for German armor narrows. Air supremacy grows as morning light lifts the clouds. Allied fighters strafe anything that moves in lanes the German staff has designated as safe. The weather that the Allies used as cover, a chance crossing, will no longer hide columns crawling across the French roads. Back in Berlin, messages accumulate. Some are short, enemy landing multiple beaches. Some are a string of calls. Paratroopers reported at Sainte-Mère-Église, bridges seized. The translation of battlefield fact into policy takes place through Jodl's fingers and Keitel's face. Yet there is a third element that will shape the morning just as much: belief. Belief that Normandy is not the main show but a decoy. Belief that the main Allied effort will come at Pas-de-Calais, where the shortest sea crossing and the Phantom Armies have made a convincing stage. Belief is not a trivial thing inside a staff room. Belief is doctrine in costume. Around 9 a.m., Rundstedt signs an order under his own authority, directing 2 armored divisions to prepare to move to the threatened coastal sector. It is the kind of decision that a soldier is trained to make, small, decisive, operational. But the rules have been rewritten by politics. The request goes up the chain. Keitel replies, await Führer's order. The reply is a stone on the map. The Panzer columns, already slow for reasons of weather, reconnaissance, and air risk, are told to hold. And so the morning becomes a study in inertia. The men in the field feel time slipping. The men in the rooms of decision practice a dangerous patience. Radios and dispatches are alive with urgency. The formal strings move at the speed of fear. Rommel, where he hears, later that morning, his home, will call through the chain himself, a field marshal, as bluntness cut with anger, and find that the answer still returns folded, central approval required. He will not be present as the first reserves move, because he has been at his wife's table. That absence will be transformed into a symbol later, as historians draw arrows from a chateau in southern Germany to the beaches of Normandy. Within the OKW, the map becomes a kind of altar. Men press their foreheads to its paper ridges and try to imagine the weight of men on the white sand. Keitel, who knows that the decisions he withholds or grants will be argued about for years, makes call. That will be described later as cautious or incompetent, depending on the court of later opinion. Jodl, who accepts the raw bones of staff life, reports, telegraph signals, the neat geometry of supply lines, begins to feel the room tilt into moral arithmetic. He writes orders, stamps them, calls them through. A single command, one yes or one no, could unfreeze the armored reserves trapped in regional custody. By 10 a.m., the Allies have achieved what they wanted in the most dangerous sense. They have a foothold. Sand is stained and churned, and men are flowing inland through gaps that were small at dawn and wider by noon. The sky is full of Allied aircraft sweeping lanes, and the channel sits like a silver wound behind the landing craft. The German front will hold in places and crack in others. The question that matters for the morning, would the strategic reserves be released, and when, is still unresolved. Men in the field cross their fingers and wait for paper that will, perhaps, never arrive in time. Here, in the operations room, a young map clerk looks up from the pins and says something that will travel across the staff. A small electric shock. If reserves cannot move without Hitler's personal permission, we will have lost the decisive hours. It sounds simple. It looks obvious. But history is often an accumulation of obvious things that were never acted upon. The room goes quiet. For a heartbeat, everyone considers the truth of that thin sentence. Then the telephone rings and someone must answer. The morning is not over. The first hours are a test of doctrine, of courage, and of how a bureaucracy behaves when the enemy chooses to act without asking permission. Decisions will be taken, some made too late, some made at the wrong place. Some orders will be obeyed, others ignored. Lives will be committed on the slope of a hill, behind a hedgerow, under a sky full of steel. But at this precise hour, while coffee grows cold and maps fill with pins, one fact has already lodged itself in the throat of every staff officer. The Allies have landed, and the German High Command has been forced, for the first time in a long while, to see its own hand tremble. And the tremor will have a name: delay. That delay will, by the end of the day, look like indecision. By the end of the week, it will look like catastrophe. But, for now, as men argue over telephones and coffee and the correct grid reference for a Panzer column, a single question remains open and dangerous. When will the great armored hammer be allowed to fall, if at all? By 11:15 a.m., the telephones in Berlin are almost unbearably loud. A chorus of panic filtered through decorum. Each ring is a summons to act. Each click a reminder of the impossibility of speed in a bureaucracy built to be cautious, obedient, and ceremonial. Oberst Alfred Jodl sits in the OKW, his fingers tapping a rhythm on the map table, as if he could drum urgency into reality. Around him, adjutants shuffle reports, each marked urgent, each stamped with times that already seem outdated. You can almost feel the desperation seeping into the walls. In rooms across France, German generals wait. Major General Heinrich, now pacing in the tented office of his division, watching the clock while waves of smoke from shelling curl along the horizon. Every minute is a wait. Every tick of the wristwatch a small echo of helplessness. The Panzer divisions, their engines silent for now, sit in mud and shadow, waiting for an order that cannot come without the signature of a man 800 miles away who sleeps through the morning. At 11:30 a.m., a new report arrives. Paratroopers have seized Saint-Mère-Église. Bridges are in enemy hands. Coastal artillery is being neutralized by precise Allied fire. The German officers in the field understand the stakes in a way that the distant bureaucracy cannot fully grasp. If the armored reserves do not move now, the window closes. In Berlin, the report is received, read aloud, and filed. Acknowledge receipt, it says. Acknowledge but act. That is another story entirely. The real stranglehold is not confusion nor even fear. It is protocol. Hitler's rigid chain of command, built to guarantee obedience, has transformed into a trap. Rundstedt, a field marshal accustomed to initiative, must now translate his intuition into requests that climb a ladder of hesitation. Request permission to deploy Panzer divisions. Await central approval. Each phrase is a tick of bureaucracy, a motion that fills the air with formality while time bleeds from the battlefield. By 12 p.m., the reality becomes impossible to ignore. Coastal towns are contested, not defended. The Allies are pushing inland along wide hedgerows, supported by tank, infantry, and aircraft working in seamless, lethal coordination. German commanders see the pattern and feel a rising tide of panic. A young colonel, writing in his log, scratches the words that will haunt him: orders delayed, opportunity lost. The sentence is brief, stark, and raw, a confession in ink. Meanwhile, in Rommel's temporary headquarters, the Marshal receives word via secure line. His voice is sharp, almost brittle, as he calls his adjutants. Why are the Panzer divisions not moving? Why has Central Command not authorized release? He paces the room, listening to reports, visualizing the beachhead, imagining the chaos already growing along the hedgerows. Every detail is a dagger. Every delay is a betrayal of the principle he has preached for months: flexibility, readiness, and action. The first attempt to break the log jam occurs around 12:45 p.m. Jodl, sensing the collapse of control, drafts a request directly to Hitler's private secretary. It is a careful document, precise, polite, urgent. It asks for permission to move armored divisions to Normandy. It stresses the immediacy of the threat. In the OKW, every eye follows the delivery. The question is no longer whether Germany can respond. It is whether the machine of command will allow a response at all. At the same time, Rundstedt sends another wire. Enemy forces have established firm beachheads. Movement of armored reserves critical. The words are typed with nervous precision, but in Berlin they meet the same filter. The staff cannot act without the Führer. One officer mutters under his breath, the war has become a test of signatures. In Normandy, Allied soldiers are unaware of the invisible struggle shaping their fate. They know the beaches, the hedgerows, the deafening roar of artillery and aircraft. They see the German armor sitting idle in the distance, their chance to be broken, for now constrained by invisible papers, by rules, by fear. The Allies move with an energy born of necessity and trust in planning. The Germans move with hesitation, born of fear and obedience. By 1:30 p.m., the High Command's delay begins to cascade. Reports show isolated German units attempting piecemeal counterattacks, unsupported by armor. The beachheads are stabilizing under Allied firepower. Luftwaffe attempts at intervention are scattered, uncoordinated. Every hour that passes without armored support strengthens the Allies' hold, and every hour magnifies the paralysis in Berlin. Jodl sits quietly, yet the room around him vibrates with tension. Adjutants whisper about the consequences, about the men on the beaches, the Panzer divisions that cannot move, the general staffs that can only wait. Keitel, for his part, leans back in his chair, staring at the maps as if the lines drawn in ink might somehow shift of their own accord. The human element is failing, the bureaucratic element endures. Then, at 2 p.m., a new intelligence packet arrives. A set of photographs showing Omaha beach, vehicles landed, casualties mounting, the beach full of Americans moving inland. The images are small, grainy, and horrifying in their clarity. The room goes silent. A young clerk whispers, "This is no feint. This is real." The words hang in the air, unnoticed by some, devastating to others. The panic has not yet fully arrived. It will soon. As afternoon sets in, the consequences of hesitation begin to crystallize. Every tactical opportunity to blunt the invasion, every chance to isolate beachheads before they solidify, has been squandered by a system that cannot act without a single man's approval. Decisions that should have taken minutes have taken hours. By mid-afternoon, the invisible hand of protocol has effectively determined the fate of Normandy for the first critical hours. The German High Command now faces a paradox. They are powerful, yet frozen, informed, yet impotent, numerous, yet divided by one man's grip. The very structure, meant to secure control, has become the instrument of delay. And in Normandy, every passing hour strengthens the Allies' grip, bringing them closer to the inland roads, closer to breaking the fragile hedgerow defenses, closer to making a foothold permanent. As 3 p.m. approaches, the OKW room is filled with a strange mixture of urgency and paralysis. The telephones ring, papers shuffle, officers confer. But the armored divisions remain in place. The first full wave of Allied forces has succeeded. And one small bitter truth begins to emerge among the staff: the system cannot save them. Their own chains are now their heaviest burden. The question remains, echoing across the maps and telephones: will the Panzer divisions ever be released? Or has the German High Command, shackled by its own rules, already lost the first decisive hours of D-Day? By 3:15 p.m., the tension in the German High Command had become almost tangible. In the offices of OB West, maps were spread across tables like battlefields frozen in wax. The pins and markers, once instruments of certainty, now mocked their users with immovable accuracy. The beaches were held, the inland roads were open to the Allies, and nowhere on the map was there a clear path for counterattack. Major General Heinrich, pacing the tent that housed the 21st Panzer Division staff, could feel the weight of every delay. His officers shuffled nervously, glancing at the horizon where plumes of smoke rose from the beaches. Orders had been requested, wires had been sent, approvals awaited, but Hitler's personal authorization had not yet arrived. Every tick of the clock hammered into their collective anxiety. The division's tanks, powerful machines capable of shattering infantry lines, were immobilized by bureaucracy. Men trained to act decisively were reduced to waiting, helpless. In Berlin, Keitel and Jodl wrestled with the same dilemma. The reports from Normandy were now too concrete to dismiss: paratroopers holding bridges, beaches firmly occupied, German coastal batteries neutralized. Yet, the question remained, To release the Panzer reserves was to disobey protocol unless the Führer explicitly approved it. And the Führer, stubborn in his routines, was still insulated from immediate reality. You can almost feel the room trembling with frustration. Officers speak in clipped tones, arguing over details of division placements and fuel availability. Rundstedt, sensing disaster, sends another message to the center: immediate deployment required. Beachhead solidifying. The phrasing is desperate, almost pleading. Yet the reply is the same refrain: await Führer's decision. The dilemma is not just logistical, it is psychological. Rommel, if present, would understand instinctively what was required: swift, concentrate, counterattack, striking the Allied beachheads before they could establish depth. Instead, Rommel is miles away, and the system he designed for rapid, flexible response is trapped under layers of authority. Every commander feels it. The weight of expectation, the paralysis of procedure. By 4 p.m., reports from Normandy show the first signs of Allied consolidation. Small units of German infantry attempt to hold positions along the hedgerows. But without armored support, their efforts are piecemeal. Machine guns can slow a tide, but they cannot reverse it. Allied forces, moving with relentless coordination, press inland, capturing villages and securing key routes. Every lost minute is an advantage to the enemy. Every immobile Panzer tank a symbol of what could have been. Back in Berlin, Jodl grows impatient. He drafts an urgent telegram directly to Hitler, emphasizing the critical nature of the moment. The enemy has established beachheads. Immediate authorization for armored counterattack is essential, he writes. Keitel, sitting across the table, nods, but both know that the telegram is still subject to filtering by the Führer's inner circle. The chain of command, designed to maintain absolute control, has become a cage. Meanwhile, in France, the armored units are caught in limbo. Generals and colonels plan routes, estimate fuel consumption, and calculate risk, but all of it is moot without approval. Tanks roar in idle readiness, engines idling, crews tense, and soldier exchanging glances heavy with anxiety. Every commander knows that once they begin their movement, retreat may be impossible. Yet, the orders remain absent. At 5 p.m., Rundstedt convenes a council of division commanders. Maps cover the tables, each line and marker now imbued with the knowledge of missed opportunity. He speaks in low, urgent tones. The enemy is establishing a permanent foothold. The Panzer divisions must move now, or all will be lost. The men nod, understanding both the strategic imperative and the political impossibility. They are caught between action and obedience, between initiative and fear of reprisal. Reports indicate that the first American units have reached key crossroads, essential for inland movement. The urgency becomes palpable. Every officer in the room can see it. The Allied forces have momentum, and momentum in war is a force as lethal as bullets or shells. Yet, the authorization for movement remains chained to a man far away, whose perception of urgency is filtered through ritual and protocol. The paradox of D-Day becomes starkly visible. The German High Command possessed the strength to counterattack decisively, but lacks the operational freedom. Tanks, men, and firepower sit idle, not because of incapacity, but because of a rigid command system that values obedience over initiative. It is a system where the best decisions can be made too late and the wrong ones on time. By 6 p.m., Keitel grows increasingly tense. Reports are piling in, each one reinforcing the same troubling pattern. Enemy forces are consolidating. German units are fighting in isolated pockets, and the crucial armored reserves remain immobilized. He reviews each report with a tight jaw, aware that every delay compounds the disaster. The telephones ring continuously. Officers rush in and out. Papers are stamped, logged, filed, but action is still on hold. In Normandy, Allied soldiers push through the first line of hedgerows, their morale buoyed by the lack of immediate German armor. They do not yet realize the bureaucratic paralysis that has spared them, nor the stakes of the hours slipping away behind them. To the Germans, it is a nightmare scenario, superior numbers and firepower poised, but unable to intervene because a single signature has not been granted. By late afternoon, the tension reaches a breaking point. Rundstedt considers bypassing the chain of command entirely a dangerous act of initiative that could result in severe punishment if unsuccessful. He weighs the lives of thousands against obedience to a distant, rigid command. It is a moment that crystallizes the paralysis gripping the German heart. Command action is needed, yet action is forbidden without permission. And then comes a small, unexpected breakthrough. A courier arrives in Berlin with direct visual confirmation, photographs of Omaha and Utah beaches, showing entrenched Allies and advancing columns. The images are undeniable. Jodl reads them, then looks at Keitel. They understand. The time for hesitation is closing. Decisions must be made. But even now, the chain of command will not fully release the Panzer divisions. One more step remains, one more layer of approval that delays movement until hours have been lost, and the beachheads are secured. The German High Command is trapped in its own rules, a cage of paper, procedure, and fear, while the Allies, alive with momentum, are pressing the advantage. The question hangs in the air like a storm cloud. Can the armoured reserves ever be brought to bear in time? Or has the rigid bureaucracy already decided the first decisive outcome of D-Day?